I am Halli Casser-Jayne, and welcome to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, where along with my partner in politics, former White House correspondent Matthew Cooper, we slice and dice all things politics, and some days, Donald Trump, too. This week, I sit down with author and historian Julian Zelizer to talk about his important new book, Burning Down the House, Newt Gingrich, the Fall of a Speaker, and the Rise of the New Republican Party. Stay tuned. But first, we begin with our weekly take on all things politics with my partner, Matthew Cooper. Here we go. Welcome, my friends. Here's where we are this week. We've reached yet another milestone. There are more than 3 million cases of COVID-19 in the United States, the largest amount of cases in any country worldwide, more than 131,000 dead, more than 60,000 Americans contracting the virus every day. Here in Florida, where I am, now considered the epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic, after Florida began reopening, Miami-Dade County's daily rate for confirmed COVID-19 cases skyrocketed from about 300 a day to more than 2,000, according to CBS in Miami. Florida took more than 3 months to reach 100,000 coronavirus cases, but it just took 2 weeks to get from 100,000 to 200,000. Intensive care units in more than 50 hospitals here in this state are now full. Texas, Arizona, California are in just as bad shape, maybe worse. Welcome to America, land of COVID-19. Good morning, Matthew.
Hi, Halli. How are you?
Scared.
I hear you. A lot to be scared about at the moment.
Oh, my God. I knock my head against the wall every day, every time this Ron DeSantis character opens his mouth. And I just go, what? What's it look like to you in Washington when you see what's going on down here? Tell me what it looks like. Give me an idea.
Well, I guess it looks like a mess. I mean, as does, Arizona and now Southern California, that, we have an expanded outbreak and no real plan to how to control it. So, it doesn't look good.
But when you look at a governor stand before a camera and lie, as Ron DeSantis is continuing to do, as a journalist, what do you say? If you could be there with him and say, let me ask you a question, what would you be saying to this guy? Because I don't think reporters are handling him properly. That's what I think.
Yeah. Well, tell me what he lied about. Tell our listeners.
What he's lied about, first of all, he's okay. For one, he said unequivocally, I think it was yesterday or the day before, that this is under control and hospitalizations are going down. Well, first of all, let you all know that he is not allowing the statistics of hospitals to be put out there to the public. I mean, what we know is coming from, intrepid reporters finding whatever. Or yesterday he had to do something publicly that told us how bad it was, which is he had to ask for New York and a couple of other states to send some nurses and doctors into Florida because what we had wasn't able to cover it. Of course, I tweeted, well, thank you for telling us how things really are. This a couple of hours after he stated unequivocally that this is under control and that the numbers are going down. They're not going down. I didn't see this morning's number. Yesterday, the cases were over 10,000, which, by the way, is the height of New York's pandemic with daily. We had 11,200 last Saturday. So, yeah, that's what I'm saying to you. He's lying about the numbers directly to the camera.
Right. Well, I hear you. And what's it like being on the ground there?
Everybody is really scared. Really, really scared because they know that they're not getting correct information. That's number one. After they lifted the ban on what you could do, the streets were crowded and they're not now. They're back to even before that. There's even less traffic. But everybody who I speak to just says, I don't believe a word he says and I'm not going anywhere. Now that's great for the older people who can afford to do that because they're on Social Security and they're retired. That doesn't help the kids who are the ones who are getting out. They're everywhere. And they still seem not to be terribly afraid of. Yeah.
Were people wearing masks? Were you seeing them?
Some yes, some no. And I have to tell you, I'm not going very far. I go to the supermarket and I think I've been to a couple of chain stores to pick up some dog food like that. But other than that, when I'm there, people are still without masks. And actually, I'm going to tell you, I did this kind of happened. This is a international community. Yeah, people live here, come to live here from...
In your part of the state.
Well, the whole state is that way. Wherever you go,
right.
There are people, this is not a completely, old white American state. We have people from Haiti. We've got people from Germany. We've got a huge traffic from up north in Canada. This is a very international place. And I particularly live in what I think is, a lot of foreigners. They're the ones not wearing the masks because everybody who I saw who wasn't wearing a mask was not an American. So I don't know what that means.
I'm a little surprised by that.
Yeah, I don't know what that means. But I encountered a German couple a couple of days ago. I encountered some people from Puerto Rico. There they were.
Yeah,
so,
that's interesting.
I don't know what that means, but that was my whatever. But before we get into what the big news of the day is today, I did want to continue this conversation on coronavirus about this business with kids going back to school.
Right. Right. Both colleges and secondary and elementary school. Sure.
How are you feeling about that?
Well, it's. I don't think we know yet. I mean, I think people are Fauci and parents and others are very, eager to kind of reopen. I mean, there is a real cost to keeping them closed. On the other hand, nobody seems to have a really good plan for how to do it safely. And it doesn't help that Trump, interfered with the first set of CDC guidelines coming out. So I don't really know, both how it's going to work on the ground and kind of the political fallout. I don't know if parents are going to be freaked out about sending their kids back or freaked out if they can't send them back. So I don't really know.
First of all,
do you have a take?
I do have a take. I always have a take. You know me. CDC Redfield. Never trust a guy who wears a Civil War type beard. Let me just start there.
Oh my God. Okay.
All right. So it's sad how he's let himself be railroaded by Trump. There's a political story here, obviously, and the political story is Trump has no chance, I think, at this point, if the kids don't go back to school because you can't get the mothers and the fathers to go back to work. If the kids are at home and somebody has to take care of them there. So are we agreed that like the opening up of the states that didn't go so well, thank you to Mr. Trump demanding the states reopen, and the Republican governors like DeSantis down here said, okay, whatever you say, sir. All that didn't go well. I would apply that same kind of, oh my gosh, maybe you shouldn't open the schools kind of thing, because Trump's whole motivation for it is nothing more than we need to get the parents back to work so that the numbers get better for me and the economy looks like it's improving. Would you agree there's some of that involved in Trump's being adamant about sending kids back to school?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Ron DeSantis, the schools are going to open. We have the highest cases of coronavirus in the country. I think maybe yesterday Arizona might have topped us, but generally. And they're going to say, no, I think it's a horrible thing to do. If you're going to close the bars, Matt, and you're going to close the gyms, but you're going to send the kids to school, and let's be clear here. You're not sending just children to school. You can't run schools without adults, and they're the ones who become the victims.
Right. I think that's a
piece that
I mean,
nobody's talking about it.
Since the more we learn is about, how different the ages are. They respond to it. I saw a study today that people in their 80s are, cited in the Times, that are 20 times more likely to get ill from the virus than people in their 50s, and hundreds of times more likely than kids. So it's
but they're finding out with kids.
It's an interesting question, though. Can you protect the adults and have the kids go back?
And of course, the germs then start spreading. My friend said, if your kid was of school age now, what would you do? And I said, nope.
Well, that's right. That's what I meant earlier. Is like, are parents going to say, hell no? Trump's messing around with the various guidelines, and it's all political, and I don't trust whatever they say, and so I'm going to keep my kid at home no matter what. And then other people are going to say, like, Jesus, we've locked up all year. And, kids don't get it anyway. And it's, time to go back. And if, the math teacher gets it, that's their problem.
Cruella de Vil, Betsy DeVos. Now, she's really a scary lady. She's not wrapped real tight. I am so sorry to have to say that, but it's true. I mean, she's a cold character. Her kids, if they were of age, were in private school. Same, by the way, could you ask Ivanka, you going to send your kids to public school? Are you going with them?
Right, exactly.
I mean, come on, stop it. This is horrible stuff. This is horrible stuff. I don't know what's going to happen with that. I just don't see how you can make it work anyway. I think it's August 6th in this state is considered the first day of school, and how they're going to enforce it anyway, because it's local. It's not federal, regardless of what Betsy and Trump say, about withholding money. I mean, the decision has to come from the local level, local school board.
Right. No, absolutely. So that's, I assume we'll have a patchwork.
And we know how well that works. I mean, this country, Matt, is in the situation we're in because every other country that's been successful in getting their kids back to school, stopping the virus, doing everything, were successful for one very good reason. They had leadership at the top, and it was all coordinated. This mess is because we don't.
Well, I think no question. I mean, look, in East Asian cities, which are crowded, kids are going back to school, subways are full. And, their caseload is much lower than ours.
And we can't even go to the EU if you want to get away from this crazy because they won't let us in.
I know. It's kind of amazing. You can't go to Paris.
It's kind of amazing that Americans are being told they can't go to Paris.
We didn't think the wall would be around us.
A good one. Isn't that the truth? The other issue here is the tests are not working. They don't have enough tests. I mean, they had all this time to get things together. They don't even have that. So, we'll have to wait to see how all of this plays out. But
right.
and which takes us now to
the death rate. Just before we go.
Go.
I think if the death rate remains low, we'll see how that affects it.
Everything that I've read is the death rate is a lag number, which is why...
Right. It could just be a lag.
Yeah.
And then it's going to surge, which would be awful. Or it's not going to surge, and then we're in an interesting place where the cases keep rising, but people aren't getting sick, and so, we'll see.
Remember, where are we? This is July 9th?
Yep, absolutely. It's all, clearly this is a very fluid situation.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So of the big story of the day, just broke the Trump tax returns. What's your thoughts?
Well, I think a lot of people were surprised that the conservatives on the court backed, the rights of the Manhattan DA and Congress to probe his tax returns. Now, they didn't say he has to hand them over right now. They kind of sent things back to the lower courts to sort out a little more. But it was still a big defeat for Trump. And, it wasn't the unanimous verdict in the Nixon case where he had to turn over the tapes, but it was pretty, it was pretty close
7-2, yeah.
Yeah, and it's, Trump's appropriately freaking out this morning. He's on Twitter whining about how it's so unfair. And, then the bottom line is we're not going to see his tax returns before the election. If he loses, it may be a historical footnote, or it'll be a question of whether everybody keeps pursuing it. But it's pretty dramatic, and I think people who are, cynical about the rule of law and that Republicans would just rule for a Republican president should be pleasantly surprised.
I have an issue with it on this score. First of all, at some point, we will see them, at least vis-a-vis Cyrus Vance's office, because they're going to prosecute him once they get him, and they'll get him whether it's before the election or after the election. We can't see grand jury stuff, but ultimately they'll be out. But I think the court is odd. Now, I'm no lawyer. A lot of this is, what do I know? But here's what I do think. The court did not take in consideration the right of the public to know. I don't think there was any mention of that in any way in any of the decision. And I think that's wrong. I think part of that case, now whether it had to be brought as something extra or special or another case, should have been that the people have a right to know. Now, subliminally that was answered because, like you said, 7-2, they said, you're not above the law, buddy. But I think in the case where you're up against an election and where this has been, I think the court should have dealt with that on some level. Whether that was because they failed to bring that into the consideration in the cases that were brought to the court, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a lawyer, but I do think that the public does have a right to know, and I think it's wrong to delay the public's right to know, because we always know you can go back to the lower court and you can play around with this forever. And they can even bring it back to the Supreme Court after they go to the lower court. So you see my point.
No, I totally do. I mean, I think while in a kind of, cosmic justice sense, the public has a right to know. The Supreme Court, has to deal with the laws and the Constitution as they're written, and there's nothing written there about it.
A right to know in a timely, right, a right to know in a timely manner. Time is a huge issue with the court. They don't grant, reprieves of this. It's, we are the court. We're in a hurry. But, maybe that's a case that needs to be brought to the Supreme Court, because I don't think it's fair. I really don't think. Now, it'd be interesting to me to see whether or not any of this stuff leaks out at this point, because it's out there.
No, it's always possible. I mean, certainly that's the story behind the Mary Trump book that's out this week.
We're going to talk about that in a second. Let's stick with the election first before we go to Mary. I want to talk about this election. Polls are saying, Matt, Trump doesn't just get trounced. I mean, it's not a blue wave. Republican pollsters are saying blue tsunami. What are you saying?
Yeah, I'd say right now that's the case. I think it's bound to tighten up. It's just sort of the nature of these things a bit. But, at the moment, he's in real trouble. I mean, let's see what it looks like in September, October. But, yeah. He's in real trouble, and it's across the board. It's going to affect Republicans everywhere the way it keeps going. I mean, he's not showing. I mean, look, I think people are willing to sort of, put up with the bad stuff, when things are relatively good. But, now it's just, the huge unemployment, the corona mess. Nobody gets a sense from him that he's got any command of it. He's only acting nuttier. So, of course, this is hitting people where they live, right? Do I send my kid to school? These are very personal issues, not kind of abstract issues. And that's killing them, right?
Yeah. And it's not early anymore. July 9th is not. Right? So it would be really hard for him to make a huge comeback. I agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. Everything tightens up. It's just that if you're this far out, what's the tighten up kind of thing?
Yeah, but I don't think you have a lot of opportunities. You got debates, maybe. You don't really have a convention in a normal sense, dominating primetime broadcast television, at least, and cable. So I agree. Time's running short for him to figure this out. And I think, Biden is, chugging along.
Yeah, he's playing it smart.
I think it's going to take a lot for Biden to blow it at this point.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by this. I think this is really quite going to be something. The GOP convention is set for Jacksonville. Jacksonville people, locals have sued to stop it. Let's see if it actually happens there. I still think it could just end up being a ballroom at Mar-a-Lago. Yeah, well, I just think that if that happens, Trump is that's going to hurt Trump if it doesn't happen. I think it's interesting that 5 Republicans have said they're a no-go. I think with Romney, Lamar, Alexander, Grassley, Collins, and Murkowski. Now, Lamar, Alexander, and Grassley are old. We get that.
Right. Still, that underscores the point.
Exactly.
Screwed.
Exactly.
Like, if you're too old, you're afraid to die. You go to a convention. So,
and you're not willing to take one for Trump. I think we've got a break here. I think Republicans are breaking with the big boy, at least on this issue.
Yeah, I think their self-survival mechanism's been a little off. They've been so focused on primaries and not getting outflanked by, more Trumpy candidates. And now they're starting to say, oh, my God, we have to go to a general election. And,
now what? Right.
We're going to get screwed.
Yeah. And here, what else is interesting? In those terms, I get emails from Trump, I get all the Republicans send me their stuff because I want, I'm on their list. I want to see what the hell they're talking about and how many of them are getting killed in Dems outraising money, including Lady G. Lindsey Graham is getting killed on that front. That to me is a big one. Again, this month, Biden outraised Trump, which is amazing because that was a big juggernaut to outraise. And Ronnie McDaniels has been, had raised all that money last year when things were before all it hit the fan. But I think money is telling. And so now,
absolutely. I mean, we don't know all the dark money on either side and all the different groups who can throw money in, but the mere fact that a president of the United States can't keep up with fundraising with another candidate who's, more or less underground is pretty incredible. Look, he's on track to lose the moment. I'll just give you one scenario where he doesn't. Okay, Biden makes a couple of big mistakes, right? I mean, and that's a big if. And then I think if this death rate really goes down a lot and people do kind of go back to school and the unemployment starts to tick back down as it did again today, or at least jobless claims were at a lower rate.
By 1%, 1.4 to 1.3.
I think it's a stretch, but I think you can begin to see a little light for Trump.
Can I blow that one for you?
Well, sure. That's not hard, but go ahead.
Well, the thing is this, that come October, this virus, no matter what you do, you're going to have the flu come back too.
Right.
And that's going to blow it all because people are going to be getting, and so you can dance all you want to dance now for the next few months, but hello. Fair enough. I think, that's where it's going to get dicey, and Trump knows that. That's, he knows that. So,
there is a certain point where, like, the dog won't eat it. Like, no matter what you do to the food you put in front of the dog, he just won't eat it. And, it got that way for Bush after a while. I mean, he wasn't running for third term, of course, but you can't. But, people were really done with him by the summer of 2008. Just too much was wrong. His popularity stayed, like where Trump's is. They may be at a sort of point like that.
Yeah, we'll see. But the one thing we do know that is come October, it's going to get dicey.
I don't think he's going to win this, like, with statues. I think that stuff, was tolerated.
I don't think
encouraged in different times, but now we're in a crisis. I mean, it'd be like if,
Yeah, I hear you. Tucker Carlson, Fox News. I mean, seriously, Matt, at what point do you go, wait a minute? Now, you are starting to see some breakaway there and some nod to reality. Laura Ingraham said there's a possibility Trump is going to lose. That was big for her to say it. But this is irresponsible stuff that's going on over there, which they've always been irresponsible. But why dig your heels in when you see the handwriting on the wall? Why play it?
Well, I think with Tucker, the ratings have been extraordinary since he took a super right turn from, he was already obviously conservative, but has gone much deeper into kind of white nationalist territory. And, the ratings are up, and a lot of these companies find it hard to argue with that, even at the same time they do all their homage to Black Lives Matter. And
the ratings are up, but they're losing.
He's on a tear.
Oh, he is on a tear,
yeah,
but
he's down to the My Pillow guy.
He's it. He's the number. He's the number one advertiser. It's
right. No, My Pillow is keeping this thing under wraps.
Right. So I part of this, I just you ride the wave for the moment, and then what? And then you go off to when Trump. Here's what I think is going on. I think that Trump is planning on buying OAN, or having his team put that together, and he's going to make a new whole deal, and he's telling these guys, you stick with me and I'll take you with me and we'll build this up.
There's no reason to buy it, right? I mean, it's there.
Well, he wants to, so he'll have control, to run it the way he wants to run it. But who was it this morning that I read, one of these Newsmax got no ratings, Nielsen.
Well, they have nobody watches it.
Yeah. So, it's all kind of, I don't know. I want to see what the pivot is going to be. Don't you? With Fox? Because they're going to have to pivot.
Well, I don't know. Are they?
Yeah. Because listen, Trump loses. At that point, he loses his MAGAs. They're going to be ginned into a whole new.
Well, I think they do even better when the Dems are in, because people are just,
I don't know. I think this country is moving to.
How they covered up Obama. I mean, I think it'll, every day it'll be like that with.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel a sea change. Hallie's gut's talking.
Well, I trust your gut.
I know. Gut. Yeah, my gut's pretty good. I feel something's going to happen.
I've been hearing for a long time that, Lachlan Murdoch, the Murdoch kids aren't going to put up with it.
Well, they haven't. They have made some adjustments. They're not 100% with Trump.
No, I know. Hey, Tucker, come on.
So they have two, Hannity and Tucker, and maybe Laura Ingraham, who I think is kind of like yawn. They're firing people when they get in trouble with sex. I mean, they're all getting in trouble with sex.
Right.
I just, we're shifting. This country is shifting again, and maybe back to the center. We'll see. And that will affect, and you're going to lose Rush Limbaugh. That's going to have a huge effect. It's going to be interesting. Couple of things I want to talk about real quick. Roger Stone, caught with multiple accounts, Facebook, Instagram. You know about that?
Yes.
Okay, I think that's interesting because he's not working for himself, he's working for Trump, and I don't think this story is getting the kind of play it needs to get.
Right. I mean, Stone involved in nefarious activity is
I understand.
Probably the least surprising headline, but I get what you're coming from.
Yeah, this is to get caught and to get stopped. Therefore, they're going to start. That was a warning. Don't even try because we're coming after you, which means that Trump can't have that kind of crap going on anymore like he did in 2016. So I think that's interesting. Barr also, by the way, Stone is about to go to the pokey, right? And Barr has been kind of loud and saying, don't try and stop this because I'll have a crazy in my department. It'll be mutiny on the Justice Department. That was another story that didn't get a lot of play yesterday. So, I can't verify whether it's true or not true, but at least that was the story that Barr is warning Trump not to commute Stone's sentence. Also, Jeffrey Berman, the former U.S. attorney in Manhattan who Barr messed with, he's testifying today on Capitol Hill. That ought to be interesting.
Oh, that will be.
Yeah. So
that will be.
I can't wait to see that. Now.
Every day's an adventure.
Well, honey, I'll tell you what. How about this Mary Trump book? You brought it up. What's the title of this thing? It's a crazy title. Too Much and Never Enough, How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man. It sounds like it's a headline for the National Enquirer, but boy, it's filled with all sorts of juicy things. Yeah,
a lot of stuff. Well, she's a shrink, so there's a lot of psychoanalysis of her uncle, and there's she was in litigation with the family, so there are records. That's how she had his tax returns to give to the New York Times. And, she's pissed. So that's a dangerous combination. I guess she had some revelations. Like she said, he didn't take his SATs. He got someone to take them for him. I think it'll be interesting when she starts to appear. I assume she'll start to do
if the court, we'll see what the court says because
she'll be on TV. I think she presents pretty well, is my sense. So that she looks faintly like. I mean, she definitely got.
She's a beautiful girl. Yeah, a pretty girl.
Yeah, very pretty. Not late 50s.
Right. Yeah, we'll see. It's interesting because I think when Trump started up about the school, it was to stop some conversation about her. I think that was part of the reason he went so loud on that. And of course, the press ran with him. If she gets out and they allow her to make appearances, I don't think he's going to be able to stop it. She's too telegenic, and the press is going to go absolutely go with her. Two things I want to bring before we come to a close. Mayor de Blasio gave the middle finger to Trump this morning. He's cordoned off the street where Trump Towers is, and they are going ahead putting Black Lives Matter on the tarmac. Hello.
And how do you feel about all that?
I think it's absurd, but I think it's funny.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I mean,
it's so New York.
Yeah, I mean, it is in New York.
But there's going to be a shot taken from some helicopter that's going to be award-winning.
I mean, he's never there. It's a certain,
Well, yeah, no, it's just giving him the middle finger, That's, And de Blasio's career is over. I mean, he blew that. So, let's have some fun. Maybe we need some fun.
He ran for president?
Please. Let me bring up, sadly, Colonel Vinderman, who testified against Trump, the Russian emigre who began his...
He called attention to this Ukraine pressure that Trump was putting on the Ukrainians to go after Biden, and he behaved with total honor, and then Trump attacked him personally, and now after being attacked and likely to be denied a promotion, he's just chosen to leave the military, and it is extremely sad and infuriating that's,
Did he ever? Yeah. And do you remember how he began that testimony? He began it with saying, this is America. I can say this here. Did he ever think he'd wind up being back in the USSR? Because he's that's where we all are. We're back in the USSR.
Yeah, it's really pretty awful.
Yeah. I hate to end on that. Got anything happy?
Well,
okay, I'll give you happy. Giuliani was punked this morning by Sacha Baron Cohen.
Oh, I saw that, yeah.
Giuliani wound up calling the cops.
Right. It was one of Giuliani's better moments, though. He went on to say how much he liked Borat. And
what else was he going to do? He looked like a jerk. But anyway, so that was fun. That was fun.
Yeah, no, that was good.
That was good. Anything else?
No, I think we'll leave it there.
Have a safe week. Listen, if I need to leave the state, will you put me up, honey? Because
we'll find an air mattress somewhere.
I'm telling you what, that's what everybody's telling me. Get the hell out of Dodge until this thing, rectifies itself. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. All right.
Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon. You were listening to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show posts new podcasts weekly at hallicasserjayne.com and is available wherever you listen to your podcasts. Be sure to find us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, on all your favorite apps. You can find the Halli Casser-Jayne Show on your Alexa device too. Just say, the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. Oh, and come play with me on Twitter at the Halli CJ Show. Politics is war without blood, said Chairman Mao. But former Republican Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich emerges as red in tooth and fang, says one review of historian Julian Zelizer's important and potent new book, Burning Down the House, Newt Gingrich, The Fall of a Speaker, and the Rise of the New Republican Party. If ever there was a time in Americans' biography to understand how we got from there to here, it is now. In his book, Zelizer pinpoints the moment when our country was set on a path toward an era of bitterly partisan and ruthless politics, an era that was ignited by GOP upstart Newt Gingrich and his allies, Gingrich, perhaps more than any other politician, introducing the rhetoric and tactics that have shaped Congress and the Republican Party for the last 3 decades. Let's talk with Julian Zelizer. I've been speaking with Julian Zelizer. His book is Burning Down the House, Newt Gingrich, The Fall of a Speaker, and the Rise of the New Republican Party. To purchase the book, visit Amazon.com and follow Julian on Twitter at Julian Zelizer. So, my friend, welcome back.
Thank you.
Nice to have you here. Let me just say before we begin, I read a lot of books, as you know, right? They come at me like crazy. You did a great job with Burning Down the House. It's just such a cut above. So important. Potent. Newt Gingrich, who served as the 50th Speaker of the House, is one of the most destructive forces to enter our politics in generations. I am so glad, Julian, you wrote this book. How timely. So let's talk about him. What he's wrought. What danger he poses to the future of the country. And I want to begin. You and I know so much. We assume everybody does. They got to go read your book. But let's help him out. Who is Newt Gingrich? Where does he come from? Give us how we got where he into Congress.
Yeah, I mean, he's this guy from a working class family outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, who spends much of his youth as an army brat, as we say, traveling through much of Europe. His stepfather was in the forces, and he ends up in Georgia. And he goes to Emory and gets a PhD in history at Tulane. And in very few years after starting as an academic, he decides he wants to get into politics. And he runs for the House of Representatives. In 1974, he loses. In 1976, he loses. And finally, in 1978, the incumbent retires, and he wins the seat. And so Gingrich comes to Washington as this Republican from the South in the late 70s. And in the early 1980s, he makes a name for himself by being the Republican who says he'll do whatever is necessary to bring Republicans control of the House after they had been in the minority since 1954. He's brash, he's arrogant, and he's incredibly ambitious in terms of what he wants to accomplish.
Ambitious for himself or for what he wants to accomplish? I mean, is this a political story? Is this a personal story? Is it both?
I think it's both. I think you can't separate the two. He is a part of this young generation of conservative Republicans who are swept away by the Reagan Revolution and the conservative movement. But he believes all of this will be irrelevant if Republicans are not powerful in Congress. And so he sees himself as a foot soldier. But that doesn't mean that his own power is not at the center of what he wants to achieve. He wants to be the person to bring Republicans into power, and it's his strategies in his mind that are the only winning way. So the two went hand in hand.
He's a professor of history, by the way, and geography at the University of West Georgia, not exactly Princeton. I mean, before he gets into all of this, smart or savvy? Who is it in that part of his psyche?
Yeah, I mean, he does receive his PhD. He writes about colonialism, Belgian colonialism, and the policies about education and why they didn't work. But he's never totally engaged in that life of the mind. He likes to present himself as professorial, but if he has smarts, they're political smarts. I think he does have a very keen understanding, not a cerebral one, of how to fight politically. So he's more of a brawler, even though he presents himself as more of a professor. And I think that's where his instincts are best in terms of how do you seize power from your opponent.
So talk to me about this. Tell us where Congress was at the time he gets in. You've mentioned, of course, that the Dems have been in control for forever, seemingly forever. But this is after Watergate. Talk to me about what he walks into.
Yeah, so he's coming to Washington at a time, it's a difficult moment. Not only had Democrats been in control and Republicans had been something of a permanent minority, but the country was tired. They had gone through Watergate. They had gone through Vietnam. The level of distrust in this country toward government was immense. And in Washington, Ronald Reagan was trying to push forward a very conservative agenda on tax cuts, deregulation, cutting the social safety net. And House Democrats felt they were the last bastion fighting this, of liberalism. And this is the world in which Gingrich enters. And it's also a world where all these new forces had taken form in this context, like reform organizations such as Common Cause, who wanted to clean up government. There were all these new rules that came out of Watergate that aimed to make politicians more accountable. The media was different. It was now an era of cable television and investigative journalism. And so he is one of these politicians who sees how can he exploit all of this to his advantage. Interesting
that you said that, because the thought that was running through my mind was he a man of his times, or did he make the times?
Yeah, he's one who makes the times. I mean, obviously the answer is yes and yes, and you can't separate it. But he's certainly one who sees things that were defining his era, and he exploits them in ways that others had not. I talk a lot in the book about cable television and the way he instantly grasps how it offers a way to communicate directly to voters, and how confrontational tactics will be attractive on that medium in a way that a lot of other people were not at least acting on at the time. So I think he's very much someone who starts to define what partisanship could look like in the post-1970s period.
How do you get to be that ugly? You know?
Well, yeah. I don't know. I think at some level, if you prioritize power over everything else, and you're someone who, in politics for sure, who doesn't care about other parts of that job, like governance, it will allow you to do all kinds of things that are pretty extreme. And part of it's personality driven, and I can't explain it. He spent much of his life rebelling against everyone who was in authority. He didn't believe in listening to other people, and he was willing to do pretty ugly things to people who got in his way.
Okay, Lee Atwater. I want to bring Lee Atwater up. Lee Atwater actually came first, right?
They actually come together hand in hand. So Lee Atwater's really involved in Reagan's campaigns, and this is when, Gingrich isn't the speaker yet, but he's also making a name for himself on Capitol Hill. So the two are kindred spirits, and they come together in 1988 in the presidential election.
And Lee Atwater is important as well. I was always fascinated by him, by the way. That's the next book you should That's another crazy story. But, he died young. I always said God wanted him out of here. Forgive me for putting my 2 cents in there. But this firebrand stuff, not that it was completely something that we've never seen in politics before. Politics is blood sport. But it all kind of came together. There were so many pieces of the puzzle that came together at that particular time with Atwater and Gingrich being there. Yeah. It was ripe.
Oh,
it was ripe for it. Maybe that's where I'm going.
No, absolutely. Atwater was a professional consultant, a political consultant to the GOP he was a big professional wrestling fan. And he used to say that politics was like wrestling. It was really about the theater. It was about the drama. And it was about being outlandish. And he also practiced a style of politics which was beyond cutthroat. Yes, politics is always hard, but he was introducing tactics at the presidential level in 1988 that really crossed the boundaries in terms of playing a racial backlash and also character assassination. So he was a compliment to Newt Gingrich, and I think both of them were kindred spirits. I think Atwater really liked what Gingrich was doing because Gingrich was into the outlandish theater of congressional politics and saying things that were just devastating. And that's what Atwater was trying to do in his campaign for George H.W. Bush.
So listen to me. This cracked me up. The man, as far as I'm concerned, meaning Gingrich, has absolutely zero charisma. I've actually done a book signing with him. He had a book on the Civil War, and I did too. Please. He tries to be engage you. You know what I'm saying? He's a flirt, by the way. My personal experience. But I gotta tell you, he's got a high-pitched voice. I think you said he had that shock of gray hair, young. Forgive me, but even in his youth, he looked like an old tubby as far as I'm concerned. And women, he could get those women. Talk to me about that aspect of him. Did you uncover some kind of Svengali thing about him, or?
Well, he had a long record of relationships. Let's put it that way, and they were relationships that became well known because they transformed into new marriages. And his personal life became a subject of magazines and newspapers during the 80s because there was a contrast between the way he lived and his being part of this new conservative religious right majority. A lot of people didn't like him. I found many people who found him very off-putting at the time, who complained about how aggressive he could be with them in private. But others were swept away by him. I don't know in terms of the romance, but certainly there were some of his followers thought he was almost a messiah, that he was someone with such vision and so much charisma in the way that he spoke that they couldn't resist it. So there were people who felt that way about him.
And yet, he has a wife who's just had cancer surgery, and he sits in the hospital and tells her bye-bye because he's got a young chickie right on the side. He marries a second one. That one doesn't last for long, and ultimately he gets to the current Mrs. Gingrich, who we'll talk about in a minute. But there is a certain, I don't know, Trumpian, dare I say it, Svengali-like aspect to this guy. I don't think we should just wash over that because he got some people to do things. Who would have thought? Gotta stay on that for a minute because I'm going to bring Trump into it, and I think there's a similarity here.
Well, one element of him picking up on what you're talking about is his personal life and his personal political life was often it was pretty problematic, from his multiple relationships with women to his own ethical problems, which have dogged him since the 1980s. He was often doing things he was accusing other people of doing. That's a consistent part of his record. He was violating ethics while he was saying other people were violating ethics. And that is a certain mindset. I don't think he cared that much about the clarity of of his personal morality on either front. It's just not something that concerned him, and yet he could speak about others and what they did with a kind of force that it didn't mesh with what you were seeing behind the scenes.
Well, we'll go ahead in a minute and talk about the impeachment of Clinton, but they all got caught for doing exactly what they went after Clinton on. Ultimately, Henry Hyde. They all end up in the same place, out for being immoral idiots. But it's interesting to me, Julian, because that kind of stuff that begins there for the Republican Party, where we are today.
Very much so. And, it's either an inconsistency where the person doesn't see the difference with their life and with the lives they're asking of others, or it paints, and I'm on this camp, the thinness of the commitment to these morals that they're arguing for, that it really is a partisan tactic. It's really a method to obtain power. And so that means they don't really have to live by these rules themselves. And I think that's a consistent story you've seen from the 80s to today. And if you take it that way, if it's really just a talking point, if it's really a way to fight others, then you could understand why they would have very little interest unless they get caught in living by the rules they want others to agree to.
And two words that come to mind. One is hypocrisy, if you go with one angle to what they were really up to, and the other one, of course, if you take it to the other level, it's elitism. There's no pretty way around it. Who this Republican Party evolved into.
Well, that's true. And I mean, that's an interesting connection between Gingrich and Trump. Both were part of a party where the policies were extraordinarily elitist. I mean, the policies in terms of the economy were all gearing up and focused on supply side economics and deregulation for business. But both tried to make this argument that the party was something different than that it had appeal to working Americans. Trump does it through playing on nativist ideas and white backlash ideas and trade issues, where Gingrich, back in the 80s, he focused on being the anti-establishment person, almost an echo of the 1960s, but from the right, and argued that the Democrats were this corrupt establishment that had to be brought down. And that was a way to package the GOP as more than a supply-side party. And so I think it's this wrestling with what does populism mean in a party whose policies aren't populist.
Well, it's interesting because I guess what I'm getting to is I think that Gingrich had a whole lot to do with how Trump presented himself to the public, and is the same game that the 2020 version of what Gingrich did back then. I just see it as, it's what do we used to call that back in the day? It's the Cliff Notes for Trump.
The Cliff Notes.
No,
for sure.
Right?
And I mean, my book wasn't written for that purpose, but I do think people see the connections, and it's not a surprise. I mean, Trump is someone who's spent a lot of time watching Fox television, and not only is Gingrich on all the time, but his generation of conservatives is on all the time. So this is the world he sees when he does watch politics. And the people he deals with on Capitol Hill are Republicans who are very influenced by the way Gingrich does business. So I think that's where he does take his Cliff Notes from. He adds a personal twist, but this is what Trump is doing.
Jim Wright. Now there's a story. Give us a little bit about what Gingrich did.
Yeah, I mean, he's this guy who becomes Speaker in 1987. He's an old school Texas Democrat who he's fighting for liberalism in the era of Reagan, but he's not someone who's very attuned to what's going on in politics. He doesn't think all the time about how some of the stuff he does might look bad in public or be used against him. He's not someone who understands that you could have politicians who, in the end, don't care about government working at all and are willing to go much further than he could ever imagine. And Gingrich picks up on a number of stories in the press that raised questions about Wright, about his relationship with a friend in the district, a real estate developer. They had a business together. Wright also sold this book of speeches in bulk to different groups who he spoke to. And there were stories that they weren't good. They certainly didn't look good. But in the end, there was never evidence he broke any rule or did that anything that much different from what members of Congress did at the time. But boy, Gingrich blows it up, and he says he's the most corrupt speaker in American history. And the story I tell is how he whips Washington into a frenzy, so that by 1989, many Democrats are saying privately and to the speaker that they don't want him to stay in the position he's in, that he has to step down. And, you know, he's not a pristine character, but he's certainly a person in politics who many think suffered well beyond what he deserved.
It's interesting, too, because at the end, he winds up years later, I think it was, writing Gingrich I forgive you note.
He does. I mean, the story, I can give away the story in that Wright resigns, and it's the first time the speaker had done that. And I found this letter in the archive. Someone pointed me to it. I was very, it was a great find. It's a letter he writes in 95 when Gingrich starts his term as speaker. And Wright, who really disliked what Gingrich did to him, felt like he unfairly criminalized him in public. He writes this long letter and he says, you know, I'm unhappy still with what you did and how you smeared my character unfairly, but I forgive you. In a religious spirit, I forgive you, and I wish you well as speaker. And then I looked for the response, and the response didn't come for like 8 or 9 months. And Gingrich just writes a short note, you know, barely engaging Wright's attitude and contrition, and just saying, you know, thanks for the note and hope all is well. And that exchange totally captured the difference between the two, and how little Gingrich really cared about Wright or about the issues he, focused on. He really just wanted to defeat him.
It was all blood sport. But at least Wright had some dignity. I'll give him that. But, you know, it brings this to mind again, going back to, or bringing it forward a little bit. You said that Gingrich's fellow Republicans, some were disturbed by his viciousness and the crazy attacks. But they weren't so disturbed that they didn't stand by him. And this also sounds like Trumpville.
Yes. One of the themes of the story is that the party leadership embraces Gingrich, even as they're saying in public that his methods are distasteful and not good for the government. There's several moments in the story where you see this happening. The House Minority Leader is a guy named Bob Michael. He's an old school Republican who gets along with Democrats. He's friendly with Jim Wright, and he believes ultimately everyone has to behave. But in the course of my story, he starts to echo a lot of the arguments that Gingrich is making. The party puts out studies about the corrupt Democratic majority, and he uses this, blistering language himself. George H.W. Bush, who's running for president in 1988, who's the kind of symbol of bipartisan civility, he, in the 1988 campaign, he starts going after Jim Wright and picking up on Newt Gingrich's themes because he sees it might be good politically. And most important, the Republicans elect Gingrich in 1989 to be the House Minority Whip, which not everyone might know, but it's an important leadership position that puts you on the path to being Speaker. And there's Republicans like Olympia Snowe and Nancy Johnson, who are moderate Republicans who vote for Gingrich. And they say, well, we know everything about him, but he seems to be the one who will bring us power. So the party leaders embraced him, even as they tried to say they weren't like him.
And the fall began. I mean, it's been all downhill ever since. Let's talk very briefly about Contract with America. But in this vein, he does have a way of narrowing down and making things simple for the average American to latch onto. That's a gift.
Yeah, no, that's what happens when you're a media savvy politician. And especially in the age of television, he understood that you didn't win politics through long arguments. You won political battles by using pointed words and pointed language and by literally creating a narrative that average Americans could understand and digest very quickly. The Contract with America was a tear-out sheet for people to take out of their reader's guide and put on their refrigerator as a promise of what Republicans would do if they gained control of the House. And it was a very effective talking point. And that's what Gingrich did throughout his career. And I think that's part of what made him strong. You know, when he's attacking Jim Wright for these ethics problems, Wright would release these very long, technical, legalistic explanations of why everything he was being charged with wasn't true and didn't violate anything. And Gingrich would just say he's corrupt. And just saying he's corrupt is much more effective on the airwaves than legalistic defenses. And I'm not sure Wright understood that, but Gingrich certainly did.
Listen, it's interesting because your book is really a book about how we got where we are today, right? So I would be remiss if I didn't talk to you and say we need to talk about the Democrats here, because behavior that you're seeing in the Democrats today, although they're trying desperately to grow a little backbone, back in the time of Gingrich's day, they're alarmed, but so they're alarmed. They're afraid that they'll sink to Gingrich's level. I think that's a quote I pulled out of the book. You know, that hasn't changed, Julian. The Dems keep playing by the rules. The Republicans figure out how to play the rules.
Yes, I think the Democrats not only are often caught off guard about where this is all going or what Republicans are going to do, but they're just much more restrained in the end, and they don't always see what's going to happen. That's the story of Jim Wright. I mean, the Wright saga ends with him resigning and making this long speech on the floor of the House warning that both parties had to lay down their arms or a mindless cannibalism, he said, would sweep through Washington and just destroy the place. And Wright kind of assumed that if he stepped down, if he did the right thing, that would be enough to satisfy the Republicans. And Gingrich had no intention of stopping. This was just one point in a much longer battle. And that difference in how the parties see things and some of the failures of the Democratic Party to really grasp the dynamics of politics as it's unfolded, I think explain a lot. You see it with the way Senator Mitch McConnell is able to tie up the chamber and stop Democrats using really pretty aggressive tactics that also go beyond the pale.
Is there any good to Gingrich?
Well, that's in the eye of the beholder. I'm sure conservatives like him, or some conservatives like him very much as a hero who brought Republicans to power on Capitol Hill. I think the way one can at least appreciate him, you don't have to reach the conclusion he's good, is that he's a serious power broker and strategist who had a big effect on politics. Not a good effect, but he isn't someone who is kind of a clown and just a haphazard person who came and went in American history. And that's part of what I want to show. He was a serious strategist who remade the way partisanship was handled by the GOP, and the consequences go on right through this day.
He didn't have a happy ending as far as his congressional career.
He didn't, and he had to step down while Bill Clinton was being impeached because in 1998, Republicans do poorly in the midterms because a lot of the public doesn't like the impeachment. And just as important, he was having an affair, which didn't go well with a Republican Party that was impeaching the president based on an affair. And he never is able, he runs for president in 2012. That doesn't go very well. And so his career didn't have a great outcome, although I don't know. I mean, at some level, I think the fact he was so influential and the fact he can see so much of himself in the Trump presidency and in this era of modern politics must still be satisfying to him.
Yeah, but it's kind of weird. I mean, he wanted to be the vice president for Trump. I think he was hoping for a cabinet position. He wound up with zero. He's like become Trump's kind of official talking head on Fox these days. He seems involved in the new campaign and putting his 2 cents in on a higher level than he had been in between. But of course, his wife Callista is now the United States ambassador to the Holy See. That's a whole other story. There's irony here, my friend. First of all, he goes away, but Gingrigism doesn't. And here we are, right? Trump, Trump's going to be out of here one way or the other sooner, or hopefully sooner rather than later, but maybe later. What happens? All these guys live on. Freedom Caucus. It's scary stuff. Let's spend
I mean, I'm one who agrees that the idea that this is all about Donald Trump, or that if Trump is defeated, the Republican Party is transformed, it's not likely. I think what you're saying is true. From Gingrich to the Tea Party to Trump, what it shows is this is where the party has evolved and what you see in front of you in terms of the partisanship and the style of partisanship. This is the modern GOP, and it's not likely to change anytime soon.
So the irony of ironies, when Gingrich was finally tossed out, who was he replaced with? Denny Hastert, right. The child molester.
Yes, really horrible story. And also, there's Hastert at the center of this new moral majority Republican Party. But privately, now we know exactly what his history was about.
So how do we leave this? What's your last word on Gingrich?
My last word on Gingrich is to understand the costs of the kind of politics he employed. And I think we're living with them every day. I think we're in the middle of a pandemic, and we're watching how a party that prioritizes partisanship above all else and doesn't really worry about any balance with governance, it leads to horrible results. And we're struggling. We're struggling to have a government that can actually deal with this major healthcare crisis. And I think a big part of it involves the party that's in power in the White House and in the Senate. And that's a legacy of Newt Gingrich's partisanship. And I hope people can think about those costs as they read the book.
Julian, terrific. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you for tuning in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, a production of Resec LLC. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show posts new podcasts Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, and is available at hallicasserjayne.com and on all your favorite apps. Be sure to visit us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and follow me on Twitter at The Halli CJ Show. Until next time, this is Halli Casser-Jayne.